I started off with preliminary observations. I mentioned three things. Discernment is between goods, things that are good. It's not between one thing that is bad and another thing good that is clear for us. And it's also for people who have personal law and the good force. And I mentioned inner movement because he's talking about the heart. Discernment does a lot with our inner movement. We feel movement inside of us. Not many of us are able to interpret this movement. But these movements are key. These movements are indicators for us. Sometimes it's hard to pin down what is really the cause of the kind of movement we are feeling. Sometimes there are mood swings. Other times you just feel you are not happy, you are dry, or you are very excited. All these movements within are very important. And I said there are many spiritual gurus in history that have discussed this. But Ignatius offers practical language to talk about inner movement. And then we went into Ignatius and his experience. I spoke about the fact that he has a special grace, the grace to see and contemplate in all things the presence of God. And Ignatius is also a man of feeling. He has this grace. He doesn't allow anything to pass by. The examen we just did is a way of ensuring that the graces of the day, the graces of the week is not passing us by without bringing them to our consciousness. In fact, the examen is called the prayer of awareness. It is a prayer of consciousness. At the heart of Ignatian spirituality is discernment. And what makes discernment possible is that awareness of that movement. As we continue today, we will see. To be aware of these movements and to respond to them. So, awareness is not sufficient. You must respond. And respond for Ignatius is to take action. In everything that Ignatius writes, he will always put some aspect of discernment. It's always a discerning process for us. Even for what we call the principle and foundation. He will say ordinarily there are things that will lead us to God. And that we will use them in as much as they lead, or we will reject them. The using or the rejection is conscious of this movement. You are expected to either accept or reject them. What is discernment? It is a process of distinguishing one thing from another, one idea from another, and for most cases, certain movement in us from another. And we also have the phrase of spirit, discernment of spirit. Spirits are what we discern. They are not spirit in the other sense that most of us use spirit. Ignatian sense of spirit is that spirit is the kind of movement that we feel. They are all spirits. They could be coming in form of joy. They could be in form of sadness, in form of dryness. They could even be in form of just motivation. You just feel that this thing, you should go for it. You should do it. Some of the feelings we experience are like joy, sadness, hope, fear, peace, and all this in Ignatian language are spirits. They are spirits. And we'll take them seriously. Discernment of spirit for St. Ignatius is to distinguish between different kinds of spiritual movements in the heart and identifying those that are of God and those that are not, in order to accept or to reject. Accept or reject will mean action. You are taking action. Because you are not just accepting by saying, I have accepted. No. for St. Ignatius to accept, you have to begin to act according to what you have understood. We mentioned from wounds to thoughts that Ignatius started thinking seriously when he was wounded. And we move from that to say, look, thinking is very important for discernment. The discernment we are asking you to do is your ability to think. And all of us have received that free of charge. It's just that we have so many things these days that we are not able to focus on a particular thought or on a particular idea. But all we do this month, we begin with a certain prayer of examen to allow us to think, to recollect. So thinking is essential. Ignatius will stop when he's reading books to think. And then I made a distinction between thoughts and thinking. Saying thoughts are the things like idea, the images, what we want to reflect on. And then the reflection itself, that active process, is the thinking. We have many things we think about. Maybe what we will eat, how we will travel to this place. The thinking is different from the thought. More often, there are thoughts in our mind. Things are coming. Images are flying. But it's not always the case that we think about them. Sometimes when something happens, we say, hey, and I did think, and this thing, they come my mind. But you didn't give it attention. But they're actually coming. They are appearing as images. They are appearing as ideas. But thinking is an active process. We use our mind to process the thought. 2 thoughts for St. Ignatius. In fact, he's not dealing with this thought as negative thing. It's just that one is worldly, the other one is spiritual. But no one is basically to do something that is wrong. He wasn't thinking of doing anything wrong. He was just seeking for fame. And then he started reading books and was also thinking, instead of fame in this sense, I can do this for God. This thought had hold on his heart. Thinking, I said, is necessary. A lot goes on in our minds. And there are many passages in the Bible that can be used as discernment. For example, nobody goes to a war that he will not sit down and calculate the cost. Whether he has 10,000 men, he will be able to fight somebody with 20,000 men. He will always sit. Nobody who will just begin to build a house and will not sit to calculate the cost. So thinking is essential, and a lot goes on in our minds. We sometimes run away from thinking, or often are just unaware of the thinking. But St. Ignatius wants us to think. And again, I spoke of the movement from thinking to feeling. And all this works with our ability to be aware. Sometimes when you are thinking of something, you don't become aware of the feelings that are arising from your thoughts. The feelings could be joy, could be joyness, could be happiness, could be excitement. The feelings could be anything. But the feeling is touching on our affective side. There's what they call affectivity. Something that it affects us. It affects us. There are times you are watching film, and you know this is film, and it is film, and you are watching film, and then you begin to cry. Maybe somebody died in the film, and that person has nothing to do with you, but is touching your feelings. You are beginning to feel very, very sad. There are times we will just say, it is ordinary film. Now film, some people will even be laughing at us. Say, now just film, or now they cry like this. But if you reflect on that feeling, it is more than just a film for you. It is more than a film for you. If you take advantage, so much will be revealed. So much will come to your awareness that this is actually a film going on, but there is something going on in your life, that film brought out your feelings. So Ignatius is very particular about feeling. When he was thinking about worldly things, he noticed a certain shift. He noticed a certain shift. Thinking about the things of the world, there was delight at the beginning. When he keeps that thought away and puts it aside, and maybe just didn't want to think about it again, he feels dry and unhappy. But that is not true when he begins to read about the saint. When he begins to read about the saint, it is different. With the saint, when he puts the book or the thoughts aside, there's a certain prolonged contentment and happiness that continues. And he reflected on this. He said, look, when I'm reading it, I was consoled. When I keep it aside, I was still content and then happy for a long time. The thought is the saint that he was thinking about. And maybe he wants to go on pilgrimage to Jerusalem. He wants to really see where Jesus suffered and all that. But the feelings are consolation, content, and happy. These are very, very important. Your feelings. There are times when you have conversation with somebody rooted in Ignatian spirituality. He will ask you to go and pray about this. And when you pray and you come back to the person will be asking you, when you prayed, not just what is the Lord saying to you, but what were you feeling? What were you feeling? It's not easy to be aware of the movement inside. But if you are able to explain that movement, you've opened an enormous window for the Lord to use you and for you to be able to work for the Lord. That feeling is key. In conclusion, I talked about becoming aware. So pleasures for St. Ignatius are delightful in the beginning, then they leave us dry, they leave us empty, they leave us feeling sad, they leave us feeling dissatisfied. But some pleasures are delightful in the beginning, and then they bring enduring consolation and happiness. For St. Ignatius, it's not always the case that what will bring you consolation and happiness will be pleasurable thing. It may be sacrifice you need to make. It may be something that will really burn you out. But in any case, because it brings consolation and happiness, Ignatius will say that is the direction to go. Ignatius does not only become aware of this thinking, but also of his feelings. I think this is just about the place where we stopped last week. The shift from thinking to feeling is paramount for any discernment. The movement of grace for Ignatius came when he became aware of his feelings. When he became aware of his feelings. We'll be using awareness a lot. When he became conscious of his feelings. Because a key to Ignatian discernment is awareness. It's an easy thing, but it's also a difficult thing to be aware. To be aware that something is happening. You know, some persons can attend Mass every Sunday and they will go and say, not the same thing every Sunday, not the same thing. They are never aware that each Mass is new. And it's even new for them. And new things are happening in their life. It's like it's repetition. Father will come, he will do like this, he will kiss altar. What did he do last week? Last week he come, he do like this to kiss altar. But each time something new is happening. And it is our ability to become aware that enables us to draw graces from all this. The moment of grace for Ignatius came when he became aware of his feelings. Delight, dry, unhappy, consoled, or happiness, etc. What then are Ignatius' observations? Anybody that will become aware is the man or the woman who has carried out some observations. There are two essential observations for St. Ignatius, and these were his observation. First, at the level of thought, at the level of just thinking, the worldly project he wanted to do, and the spiritual project of maybe going to Jerusalem, imitating the saints, held his thoughts for a long time. Both of them, he was able to think about them. They held his thoughts. They captivated him for a very long time. But at the level of feelings, there was a fundamental inequality. At the level of feelings, both did not have a hold on him like that. He might feel the light during the thoughts, but after the thought, he felt dry and unhappy about the worldly thought. But when it comes to about the spiritual thought, he felt the light at the beginning, and then he felt consoled and happy at the end about the sacred thought. So this is a fundamental difference. And Ignatius took note of that observation seriously. The moment of grace came when he became aware of the differences. So what have we talked about so far? That thinking is important for Ignatian discernment. We need to give time to the thinking process. And towards the end, we say, look, thinking alone is not sufficient. Thinking alone is not enough. The voice in the heart is essential. Our feelings are speaking. Our feelings have a voice. And we must listen to the feelings. So the question to ask ourselves is, what is your heart saying? Whenever you are looking at an issue, forget that the issue is coming from Father Ujah, so you should take it seriously. No, pay attention to your heart. Pay attention to your feelings. Forget about the origin, where it is coming from, or who is asking you to do that. Pay attention to your heart. The voice in the heart is essential. What feelings are coming out from there? Doubt, hope, sadness, consolations. When you go to meet people for spiritual direction, essentially, this is what they are looking for. Doubt. They are looking for hopes. They are looking for sadness or consolations. Your ability to become aware of this movement within you is enough to tell how the director can help you. If you are able to mention these things, my dear brothers and sisters, you will be greatly helped. From your prayers, from your reflection, if you are able to get in touch with things like doubt, hope, sadness, consolation, happiness, delight, you've achieved so much from your prayers. And the spiritual director is a guide. Any trained spiritual director senses this, takes advantage of that in that conversation. And the person is able to discern with you and point you to the direction of God's will. Otherwise, the person will not be able to say much. If they say, God, what is the Lord saying to you? It's more than just saying, the Lord said, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that. That is maybe moral awareness. But you have to reach a level of spiritual awareness that touches on these feelings, the doubt, the sadness, the consolation, the language of the heart. Although Ignatius will still spend long time thinking about fame and about the saints, he was now beginning to focus primarily on the language of the heart. As we know, some thoughts left him sad and others left him happy. Little by little, he came to understand the spirit that agitated him, the spirits that are moving within him, one from the demon, the other from God. It was this understanding that was the moment of grace, and this is the birth of Ignatian discernment of spirit. Great Saint Joseph, when he became aware that, look, he's thinking about A for a very long time, but he's also thinking about B for a very long time. But each time he stops thinking about A, he feels empty. And each time he stops thinking about B, there's a certain delight that continues. And he reflects on this feeling and begins to understand the differences, the fundamental inequality. He begins to feel the spirit that is moving him, the spirit that is agitating him. And this he shares in his writing as key to discernment of spirit. Now, what is the mindset of St. Ignatius of Loyola? Very important to understand his mindset, to understand what is happening inside. It is important to know that Ignatius relates and connects everything to salvation of souls. I started with the preliminary observation, and I said something about your relationship with God, your deep and personal love for God. It is the mindset of Ignatius. If you are not concerned about salvation of your soul, the kind of discernment that Ignatius is inviting us to do will not benefit you. Ignatius is offering something that will help salvation of souls. He believes a great battle is active all around us. A battle between good and evil. The focus to win the most valuable territory in the universe, which is your heart. It is not a land that you have that you are thinking of building 2-bedroom flats or what. That is not the valuable territory that you have. The valuable territory that you have is your heart. And the evil one is fighting to be king of your heart. But God also wants your heart. God wants to be there. Because your heart should also be God's temple. Ignatius guides in discernment first tells us that this battle exists. Tells us that this battle exists. If we don't accept this battle, then it will be very hard for us to be able to discern. So this battle is in existence. Ignatius made this discovery while he was in bed in a coffin. This is the origin of the discernment that is rooted in Ignatian tradition. It is the very reason we are beginning from here, from the story of Ignatius. Ignatius always wants to push himself further. Thinking and awareness were not enough, but essential. He started pondering on what he is now aware of. He said to himself, this thing that brings delight and leads to enduring sadness does not have the feel of God's action, but rather of the bad spirit. The contrary is true about the one that brings joy and gladness. His new awareness and understanding lead him to accept the sacred project and to reject the worldly one. In other words, he takes an action. Spiritual discernment in the Ignatian tradition follows this pattern. You become aware. You reflect on the awareness in order to understand. And from the understanding, you can take an action. You can act. You accept or you reject. So when you become aware of these images, you think about them to bring them to awareness. And you begin to realize that there are movements inside you. When you reflect on the movement, which are largely feelings and your spirit, you come to the stage of understanding. And now that you've understood that some are leaving you happy, some are leaving you sad, then you accept the one that makes you happy. And you begin to see the project. What is it that project is asking you to do? By accepting, you put into action some certain ideas and activities. By rejecting, you completely put an end to that project. You don't do that again. So we'll be looking at these 3 key steps in discernment. We have followed it closely from the example of St. Ignatius. Now we'll be looking at it one after another. You're smiling there. The time is going. We'll finish. We'll be looking at these 3. Becoming aware, awareness, understanding, and acting. Because discernment will definitely lead to an action. An action will be taken. A decision that will make you act in some certain ways. A decision that will make you refrain from acting in some certain ways. So we'll begin with awareness. Be aware. This is the effort to notice. The effort to become conscious of what is happening, or the stirring in our hearts and in our thoughts. There's a lot happening inside of us, but we are not aware. If we cannot make this transition to become aware, then discernment is impossible. A lot of things are happening. Some of us can't even remember what we were thinking about in the morning. We were not aware. But the mind is always active. The mind is always thinking. There are some beautiful thoughts you may have had today, but if you were aware of them, something wonderful will always happen. So if we cannot make this transition to become aware, discernment is impossible. Now we live in the modern world. There are factors militating against this awareness. There are factors against discerning opportunities. We have all these factors around us. We are grappling with them. It could be a contemporary culture that diminishes interior awareness. Everywhere is party. Anywhere that there is party, you are the first to jump to that place. This kind of culture doesn't make us have that interior awareness. Our world hates slowing down, lives too fast, too fast. Our world lives too fast. Our world cannot slow down. On Sunday, we'll be hearing the story of Abraham when he noticed 3 visitors. And the way Abraham was running from kitchen to dining room, up and down, he was running. And the gospel reading will tell us that Martha was also running like that. Abraham never had time to sit down with the guests. But thank God, Mary was there. And Jesus said, look, this person is not running like that. This person is sitting in one place. She has chosen the better path. Our quiet spaces have become rare. And electronic means, like some people even watch TV from their phone. So you have your TV on your phone everywhere. Cell phones are ringing. We have to begin to put in the church everywhere. Turn off your cell phone because it's becoming difficult. Internet and the like have taken control of our quiet spaces. So discernment is just impossible if you don't have that quiet space. If you want to do an Ignatian retreat like those who are doing Tridium, we'll always say, get a quiet place. Get a quiet time. Get a time when your phone will not even be ringing. A time when you can pray and you can reflect. Our world is actually questioning faith and the reality of spiritual life itself. Some will be telling you, this church where they go every day, what did they do for you? You better pass us. So we have a culture that is challenging even issues of faith. Accordingly then, the value of noticing different spiritual voices in our heart is simply unrecognized. Unrecognized. That value is not even taught. That value is not even there. Not even there. When you off the TV, you give your children tablets or phone. There has to be something that is distracting them. When we pray in the house, we hate quiet moments. We hate silences. So noticing different spiritual voices in our hearts has become virtually impossible. I will not be able to talk about these various levels of awareness. We have the psychological level of awareness. We have the moral level. This one good, this one bad. That level of awareness. They are all important. But the spiritual awareness is where discernment is concerned. Spiritual awareness. Discernment of spirit focus on spiritual awareness. Because we don't have time, I will not be able to develop the other levels of awareness. But what interests us is the spiritual awareness. Because Ignatius speaks as somebody who is interested in faith, somebody who is interested in life in the spirit, somebody who is interested in salvation of souls. And so spiritual awareness is central. Ignatius believed that the dryness and unhappiness, or the contentment and happiness he was feeling as movement within him, is connected to his Christian life, and have a message concerning the direction in which the Lord is leading him in life. He sees that as some kind of contemplative in action. He sees that as God taking advantage of this movement to communicate God's will to him. And God is always doing that. Our God is ever revealing, ever manifesting, ever drawing us closer to see where he wants us to be. This spiritual awareness enables him to know what is leading him away or what is leading him to God. Ignatius believes that God is not limited and God uses everything of the person your mind, your memory, your feelings, your understanding, your thoughts. God used everything of a person to communicate God's will to that person. This awareness is an effort to bring God into what is being considered. Into what is being considered. So when you do Ignatian discernment, you are not doing it away from God. You are doing it as a man of faith, as a woman of faith. You are doing it as somebody who has deep and personal love for God. That is where the spiritual awareness. It is not the way they will be doing. We have taught discernment to big companies and how they can use it for the progress of their companies. But we will not be touching on spiritual awareness for them. We'll be talking of other kinds of awareness. But it's the same structure of discernment. In this case, our context is spiritual. We want to do good. We want to avoid evil. After the level of spiritual awareness, which is just noticing the movement within us and trying to see that in the light of God. This is a movement that is directed within. Everything in spiritual awareness is directed towards the movement from noticing to understanding. As soon as Ignatius became aware that a project brings dryness and sadness, and another brings content and happiness, he has understood. The fact that he is able to come to that level, he has understood. So spiritual awareness will always lead to a certain understanding. Because you reflect on what you become aware of in the light of God. You know, our time is fast gone, but let me rush on this. Reflect to understand. You know, we reflect in order to understand. We reflect on the spiritual awareness to understand. Ignatius reflected on his awareness and recognized the difference between the spirits. He pondered on the two contrasting movements inside him and understood that they arise from two opposing spirits at work within him. St. Paul will also give us an excellent text. The things I want to do, see myself not doing it. It is the evil that I don't want to do that I am doing it. At that point, Paul is also becoming aware of this spirits within him, this spiritual movement within him. There are some questions we could actually ask ourselves that will help us to understand. Are these movements spiritual experience? That is, do they touch my life of faith, my life of hope? Do they touch my following of God's will? This is when you know that they are actually spiritual experience. Do they have something to do with your faith? Or do this movement bear the signs of God, like happiness when Ignatius thought of saintly lives, and sadness when he reflected on worldly life? Do they have the mark of God's hand? The last thing we'll look at is action, is decision. All this process, awareness and understanding, are not end in themselves. They are not end in themselves. They have to lead to actions. They have to lead to actions. In fact, they are not yet discernment of spirit. Both are aimed towards action. Only when we become aware and correctly interpreted it and taking action, that discernment of spirit has taken place. Ignatius is not using big words. He used two verbs: accept and reject. Accept and reject. In the principle and foundation, he will say, you can use anything in the world, though, but use it insofar, that is, accept it, insofar as it leads you towards God. and reject it insofar as it pulls you away from God. But you are free to use everything. So when Ignatius decided to accept the good spirit, the first thing he will do, he will go to Manresa and begin to pray. And then he will begin to raise money to travel to Jerusalem. When you accept, there is already a line of action that is clear and distinct for you. Discernment leads to action. Everything in discernment of spirit is directed towards action, towards accepting what is of God and rejecting what is not of God. Through spiritual awareness and the interpretation that you will give, effective spiritual action is made possible. The life of discernment calls for action. The discerning person must act in accordance with what has been understood. In summary, Ignatian discernment will follow this paradigm. Each time you are going through it, this paradigm should be your guide. Awareness, understanding, and action. Great St. Joseph.